We're just about 2 months away from Oregon's primary for governor, and at this point, it's anyone's game. Tonight, the question, can the Republicans take the governor's seat for the first time in decades? Well, maybe if the party can figure out what they're going to focus on.
Because not all Republicans see things the same way.
And let's ask some of the leading candidates where they stand on one of the biggest issues in the state, the homeless crisis.
It's a people problem. It's a humanitarian crisis.
And if the law and the judges don't allow us to go that way, maybe we need to change the law.
Here's the story. I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. All the ways to communicate with us right down there at the bottom of your screen, and we do want to hear from you. You can email us. The address is thestory@kgw.com. You can also use the hashtag TheStoryKGW on Twitter, or leave us a good old-fashioned voicemail. Just call our phone number, 503-226-5090. We are going to be talking a lot about Oregon Republicans tonight. While they've been mostly shut out of statewide office for decades, there are a ton in Oregon, 730,000 people, according to Oregon.gov. And with a wide open race for governor and a significant frustration among voters over the way things are going now, under the leadership of the Democrats, that is, this really could be their year, if only the party can get its act together. So let me explain. We're going to start with a pretty wild letter from the now former chair of the Oregon Republican Party, Dallas Hurd. He stepped down last week. He's still keeping his seat in the state Senate, but he says he's no longer going to be in charge of the Republican Party because of his, in his words, communist psychological warfare tactics. He says that's being used daily in the party to, quote, destroy anyone of true character. And that, quote, endless slander, gossip, conspiracy, sabotage, lies, hatred, pointless criticism, blocking of ideas, and mutiny have been brought against his administration, and he says it's broken his spirit. He was kind of on the extreme conservative side of the state party. He supported the attacks on the U.S. Capitol and the state capitol, and when the state capitol was breached in 2020, he was actually there in the crowd encouraging them. He's been a vocal opponent of masks, vaccine mandates, and all other COVID restrictions, even forming a group called Citizens Against Tyranny. So that got us wondering, what in the heck is going on with the Oregon Republican Party right now? Hurd took over after Newt Buehler, shown here, stepped down. Buehler actually quit the party altogether. He said he was disgusted with the party for its support of Donald Trump, and when the party officially declared the Capitol insurrection a false flag. So, where in the world is all of this leading? I took the question to Rebecca Tweed. She's a veteran Republican strategist who's run 82 campaigns, 82 in Oregon. So, she kind of knows what she's doing. She said the party is changing, turning its focus from the past to the future and becoming more moderate.
It seemed like for a while that the louder and more extreme and the, higher your litmus test was, the more Republican you were. But the electorate's not really responding well to that. If you look at Senator Hurd, who became the chair, part of that, slate of Republicans that took over the GOP were supposed to bring change. They were supposed to bring a different attitude. And instead, there was a year where Republicans didn't have a lot of energy. And that anger that Senator Hurd was bringing, folks in the party didn't want that. They want to move forward. And I think that what we've recently seen is the result of that.
Which brings us to our big story. While we're talking about Republicans, this seemed like a pretty good time to roll out our plans for homelessness, actually their plans for homelessness, by two of the leading candidates for governor, Christine Drazan and Bud Pierce. And before you Republicans start yelling at your TV or yelling at your phone, yes, I know, it is a crowded field of candidates. Several have a shot at securing the nomination in the May primary. 17 Republicans actually have officially entered the race, and we've heard from a lot of your supporters. We've been looking at campaign finance reports, and it's clear there are three other Republicans that we do need to hear from. They're Bob Tiernan, Bridget Barton, and Stan Pulliam. Those are all the candidates who right now have over $100,000 in the bank. We've contacted their campaigns today. We hope to interview them soon so that we can share their positions on important issues like violence and homelessness. In the meantime, let's hear from Christine Drazan. She's the former Republican leader of the Oregon House of Representatives at the state legislature. She said homeless issues are a problem all over the state and that just building housing is not enough to deal with the issue.
It's a people problem. It's a humanitarian crisis, and that has a whole lot more layers of complexity than just this simple question of, does somebody have a key to a tiny house to get out of the cold? It's got to be a part of the solution to have places for people to transition and live long term, but we have got to address the challenges, which are mental health, behavioral health, substance use, and of course the criminality that comes with some of the issues around substance use disorder. And in Oregon, we have some of the worst numbers for addiction in the nation. And unfortunately, along with that, we have some of the worst access to recovery services. All of that contributes to what is, in fact, a very complex problem right now. And there's a lot of money being thrown at this problem, but we have not seen it actually affect outcomes.
Would you back or would you support forcibly moving people off of the street if there were shelters available and they chose not to go?
Yeah, I think that you have to give people access to services and supports. And if at that point they make the choice not to take advantage of those services and supports, then you do need to remove them from the street.
So Drazen would attack the problem with more money or programs for mental health and drug addiction recovery, along with more shelters, very similar to what a lot of Democratic candidates have been saying. But she would also force the homeless off the streets if at the end of the day those things were in place and people would still not go. The two candidates sound pretty similar to each other, these two Republicans. Dr. Bud Pierce also believes in compassion and programs to help people with mental health issues and drug addictions. And he too would force people off the streets if need be.
If you come from the point of view that someone is out of control, they're suffering as a human being, and we need to move in and maybe force them against their stated desires to help them with all kinds of oversight. It's transparent. It's not to do anything to harm people. And you really care about people, that's what you're going to do. If you come at it from the point of view of they have to be free to do whatever they say they want to do, it's a rights issue, then you're going to go in a different direction. I think that's the direction we've gone into, and it's gotten us into trouble. And I would say for most citizens that I've spoken to, they agree with that plan. And if the law and the judges don't allow us to go that way, maybe we need to change the law and the judges. So it's basically, we're going to help you, we're on your side, there's advocates, there's overseers, there's transparency, but at the end of the day, you need to be taken to a place that is there for your benefit to help you. And if you absolutely thumb your nose at that and go back to the streets, then you are breaking the law, and then you need to be sheltered in a way that you may not like, with good, with adequate food and shelter and medical care for a short period of time, and then we'll try you again. We're never going to give up on you. We're not going to ruin you with this, but we're not going to let you live on the streets and along the riverbanks and in the forests. That's so harsh on you and harsh on us, so we just need to stop that.
Again, it is a crowded field on the Republican side. We can't talk to every candidate because we simply don't have the time, but we are talking to every candidate who is both actively campaigning and has at least $100,000 in the bank. In the meantime, tomorrow night, we'll hear from Democrats Tobias Reed and Tina Kotek on how they would deal with the homeless problems in Portland and around Oregon. Finally, a segment on politics really would not be complete without a Pivot Award. Just a quick refresher for those of you who are sampling our show for the first time and missed it last time. I like to point out when politicians and others take a question and then kind of change it to answer the one they like better than the one that was asked. That's called a pivot. And the more you watch for it, the more you're going to see it and understand that there's kind of a game within a game underway. So tonight we get to see a professional pivoter in action. Jen Psaki is the White House press secretary. Frankly, I think she does a terrific job under really tough circumstances. Yesterday, she held a press conference and was asked about Ukraine.
What does the U.S. see that would be a sign for optimism that some kind of ceasefire could be reached? In which carrots, in which sticks do you think Putin is most responding to, if that's the case?
Sure.
Most likely to respond.
Sure. Well, as you've heard us say in the past, we certainly will continue to support the Ukrainian participation in these talks and conversations, as long as they choose to continue to participate in them, of course. And we are trying to boost them by providing a range of not just economic and humanitarian assistance, but military assistance.
I gotta say, what a spectacular pivot. The question was, what would be a sign of optimism for a ceasefire? And what's Putin responding to? And what we got was a firm statement that the U.S. is supporting Ukraine. She did eventually say de-escalation by the Russians would be a good sign, but that came long after that pivot. And so for that, we award White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki our Pivot of the Day Award. Yay! There's a staffing shortage at the Clark County Sheriff's Office, and now they say if your crime isn't bad enough, they're not going to show up. The union says the county needs to make big changes if they want to hire more deputies. We'll talk about it when the story returns. To the story at kgw.com, or give us a call and leave a voicemail at 503-226-5090. We're a different kind of news show. We really do want to hear from you. Your feedback helps drive our coverage decisions, so let us know what you're thinking about. Hey, we've talked a lot on this show about staffing shortages in the Portland Police Bureau. Police say they just don't have enough people to answer every call. A lot of people say that's because there isn't enough support for law enforcement in Portland. But turns out it's not just a Portland problem. Clark County, which arguably has a lot more support for law enforcement, says they're short-staffed too. And now the sheriff's office says they're not going to be sending officers to low-level crimes, which, by the way, feels pretty high level if it's happening to you right then and there. Starting at the end of the month, the sheriff's deputies will no longer go to things like trespassing, simple assaults, fraud, minor thefts, traffic, and parking complaints. The department says even welfare checks on the houseless are too much for them right now. Reporter Mike Benner joining us now to talk more in depth about this. And Mike, I know you were out talking to at least some of the residents. This has got to be pretty frustrating for them.
Frustrating, concerning. I spoke to one woman who's lived in Clark County for 25 years. She said it's a great place to raise her family, a great place to live, and she's always thought it to be safe. But she believes that once you announce these service cuts and would-be criminals know what's coming, they might just act out more.
Yeah, hopefully that won't be the case, and we'll see how many of them were watching the news and planning their crimes, but I imagine it does happen. And I know that you tried to talk to the sheriff. They did not make him available, but you got a chance to talk to union leadership. Has this problem, this staffing problem, been coming for a while?
It seems like it has, Pat, and it's extremely frustrating. The union rep who I spoke with said that the staffing shortage and ultimately these service cuts are because of inadequate hiring bonuses and incentive packages. And what the sheriff's office is doing is trying to implore the county council to step up its game and help bring up the numbers.
Well, and that is an interesting point, and I've heard that in Portland as well, as they're having trouble hiring more officers. You know, I'm told that there are surrounding agencies that are hiring pretty significant signing bonuses. It's almost like the traveling nurses that they were trying to get for COVID, that a hospital would offer a big bonus and everybody who was available would go over there instead of going to maybe the local department where they was closer to home and they definitely needed it. So the outcome then sounds like the county needs to put more money into these bonuses. Is that what you were hearing?
That's exactly right, Pat. And what the union rep told me is they're hoping that people in Clark County see this and reach out to the county council. It is worth mentioning that we did reach out and they have not yet gotten back to us.
All right. Thank you, as always. Great stuff. Reporter Mike Benner. And we wanted to see how widespread this issue is, so we checked in with other agencies. Portland police say they are still attempting to respond to every call, but they want you to report non-person crimes online. Multnomah County said they're still answering all calls, but they are hiring as well. And Washington County says they've got staffing issues, but they're, quote, definitely not cutting responses to crimes like the list released by Clark County. And deputies will still respond if you need them. A lot of you have opinions when we talked about a lack of office workers in downtown Portland, which is making it even harder for the city to rebound.
Worked there for 25 years, and there is no way that I would go back to working in downtown.
But not everyone is worried about it. We'll hear from you when we come back. In case you missed us last night, we talked about the very slow return to normal in downtown Portland. Here's Portland City Building. It's been closed through the pandemic, but it's not bringing back nearly enough workers to help support nearby shops or restaurants. The city has 2,950 workers in downtown Portland, but they don't have to come back to work for another month, and then only one day a week. Christine Azar, who owns a coffee shop downtown, sums up the frustration pretty well.
City leadership is not coming back to work. The city is open. City employees are not coming back to the office. Why is that? They should be the first back in the office because they're the ones that need to come down here and support us.
It was amazing to see City Hall boarded up. There were birds that were roosting there. It had been so long since folks were in and out. We asked many of you what you thought about downtown. Boy, did we touch a nerve there. We are going to do many more stories on this topic in the weeks ahead. But in the meantime, here's a sampling of what you told us.
I grew up going downtown to the forecourt fountain and playing with that, and I have pictures galore of doing that from the 70s. Nothing is safe down there anymore. I'm scared for people to go there and work.
Although not everyone is in downtown, Roz writes, I work on Southwest 3rd and Morrison. I have to come into the office every day through COVID and the rioting. I feel safe during the day, even through the riots, although I admit to carrying mace. Downtown has been a ghost town for 2 years, but I now see more foot traffic and several restaurants opening back up. Can't stop Portland. But others wonder whether the danger is being overblown. Tony called us to talk about staying downtown 2 Saturdays ago.
I don't think that Portland is as dangerous as it's put out to be. I know that it's definitely gotten a little more dangerous than what it was. More so, though, I think it's more dangerous because of the homeless population.
We've heard that from a lot of people. One of the emails that came in was from you and reminded us that city workers have been downtown the entire time. Will wrote in to say, I just want to point out there's a massive city workforce that has worked during the pandemic trying to support the small businesses in the downtown area. Transit, sewers, utilities, all worked downtown during this period. He went on to add, the more people return to downtown, the better the situation will become. Thanks for reminding us of that, Will. But others are not waiting. Cindy called in to say she'd had it with working downtown. She used to work in the U.S. Bancorp Tower.
Worked there for 25 years, and there is no way that I would go back to working in downtown because there's nothing but homeless people and crazy people roaming the streets. It's just too scary. Transit is too scary. Parking is ridiculously expensive. I moved out to a building in Gresham so that I wouldn't have to go back down there.
I suspect she sums up the frustration felt by a number of workers. Meanwhile, we got this email from Marilyn who wanted us to know that some workers are coming back downtown. She wrote, Rose Festival is removing the boards from our downtown office building this week after being boarded up since November of 2020. The boards went up after multiple incursions and burglaries after the advent of the pandemic. That sounded like an interesting opportunity, so we went down this afternoon to check it out. This is that building at Waterfront Park with the big light-up rose over the roof. And workers are back. Not a lot of them, but it's important and symbolic. And the boards are definitely coming down. And they're really hoping it'll attract more people to come visit. The Rose Festival says workers are now back full-time getting ready for this year's festival. By the way, the festival is going to be back in person this year as well. Also, for the first time since before the pandemic, they've got the parades and the city fair, even the dragon boat races coming back this summer. Here's Jeff Curtis, the CEO of the Rose Festival Foundation. He says having the building boarded up has been a shame.
It's really important that downtown Portland comes back, and as part of our efforts, our comeback story is the festival is back. So as our events come back this spring, our office headquarters needs to be back. Our staff needs to be here, volunteers coming and going. We're a symbol of the greater good for Portland and a symbol of hope for the coming months ahead. And that's why it's so important that this office reopens, the boards come down, and it's a beautiful part of Portland right here at Waterfront Park.
The festival organizers also say volunteers are coming back, and as planning for the festivals pick up, there'll be a lot more of them. So let us know. Are you going to be going to the Rose Festival events this year? And what else needs to happen to help downtown Portland? What other offices are opening back up? If you know of one, please let us know. Or if you're an office worker and you refuse to go back in, let us know that too. Send us an email or leave us a voicemail. Keep your questions and comments coming to the story at kgw.com. When we come back, we'll remember a KGW journalistic giant, Floyd McKay. We'll look inside the KGW vault right after this. Yes, for this week's Hey Help campaign, we're asking you to donate to the KGW Great Food Drive. There are plenty of ways to help us reach our goal of providing 1.2 million meals to local families. We're almost halfway there. You can make a donation at any branch of Rivermark Community Credit Union. To see all the ways that you can give, or if you need assistance, visit kgw.com/food drive. And we want to thank our partners, Pacific Office Automation, Toyota, Rivermark, and Safeway, for supporting this year's food drive. If you watched KGW back in the 70s and 80s, you probably remember Floyd McKay. And if you missed him, you definitely missed out. He was a longtime journalist and political analyst for KGW from 1970 to 1987. He died earlier this month in Seattle at the age of 86. Tonight, we're going to go into the KGW vault and check out Floyd McKay's predictions for the Northwest in 1983.
Floyd McCay has some thoughts on the year to come. Floyd?
Well, Kathy, to a remarkable degree, 1982 was a replay of 1981. The Northwest was gripped by a deep recession. By year's end, it had drained much of the normal optimism from people and brought a dread of the new year. Well, the news is impossible to predict in advance, but we do know some of the big stories of 1983, and some of them are all too familiar. The economy will continue to dominate news in this region, especially for those who are unemployed or who fear layoff. The financial problems of the Washington public power supply system might be resolved, but the solution will have a lasting impact on the entire region for generations. Massive financial problems await the opening of legislatures in Oregon and Washington, and each state will at least consider a tax it has long opposed. In Oregon, the sales tax. In Washington, the income tax. Politicians will watch the moves of Senator Mark Hatfield, who must decide if he will run again in 1984. And in Washington, contenders for Governor John Spellman's job will begin making their moves. The worst specter hanging over the region as the year opens is a natural disaster waiting to happen. Spirit Lake is dammed but ready to explode, spreading mud over an area still recovering from the 1980 volcanic explosion. Some of the good news of 1983 will spring from opening a new Columbia River bridge. But much of it will come from the people themselves, the unbeatable spirit of the people, tested by adversity but always hopeful for the future.
And that's Kaleidoscope 82. Thanks for joining us tonight.
And from all of us at News 8, may 1983 be a good year for you. Good night.
And I sure hope it was. Do you hear that clatter? That's what newsrooms used to sound like. And how about those TVs behind them? Love that. Hey, as you know, the story's on every night at 6 o'clock, but sometimes you want the news on your own time. That's why we've launched a weekly newsletter featuring all of our best content, the deeper coverage you expect from this show. To subscribe, you can go to kgw.com/newsletter. Hey, that's the end of our show. Thanks for watching. But remember, the story, our story, that never ends. See you tomorrow.